I was actually in a very dark space when I started writing the script. I was 24, I was completely broke and depressed, and I didn't have the money to sustain myself. I didn't have a way of earning a livelihood for myself. And Vivek, who is the producer of the film and who's also acting in the film, was a friend of mine who I'd worked with in theatre before this. He saw me one day and he said, "Why are you so depressed?" And I said, because I'm broke and I want to write this script. I have an idea for a courtroom drama, but I don't have the money. So he decided to help me out, and he said, "You know what, I will give you a monthly stipend and you do your research and you write the script that you want to." So I found it very awkward to accept that proposition because he was a friend, and to accept money from a friend was a bit awkward. But he said, "You know what, just do it, trust me and do it, and I'm helping you out here." So that's how I wrote the script. And once Vivek read the script, he was really inspired to make the film. He said that we should make this film happen. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I'm a big fan of his acting. I think he's a very good actor, and he's primarily actor. It was his first time producing a film. So that's how he got cast in the film, because I really like him and I think he suited the role very well. And then it was very important that we choose the right crew for the film, again because there are so many Bollywood films being made in Mumbai that people have a certain way of working, they have certain ideas of how films should be made, and this film was very different from that. So we chose a crew which came from mostly either a documentary background or a non-film background. Like the production designers of the film had never been on a film set before this film. One is an architect and one is an animator. The editor of the film had never edited a fiction film. He was a documentary editor. The casting director had never casted before. So first time director, first time producer. So we had a crew that respected the project, that understood the spirit of the film, even if they were not necessarily very experienced with what they were doing. And that worked out well for us because they worked very hard and they understood the spirit of the endeavor and they gave it their all. And we had a process that we followed of doing as much research as possible, as much prep as possible, and trying to be sure that when we reach the set, we have at least a plan in our heads. Even if we need to divert a bit, or if we need to improvise a bit, at least we should be prepared on our side. And that's how the process of the film kind of unfolded, with a lot of young energy, with a lot of fresh energy. And again, we made the film, I would say, in a very uncompromising manner. I shot the film exactly the way I wanted to shoot. We would shoot only one scene a day. We shot on Arri Alexa. And in the courtrooms we had a 2-camera setup, and there was a huge lighting setup for the film. We had thousands of junior artists in the film, and we would not shoot guerrilla style. We would take a location, lock it, design it from scratch, and then set the scene. And all of these things are very tough to do in a city like Mumbai because it's very expensive, it's very chaotic. We spent a lot of time on the grading. We did the grading in Germany, in Berlin. We spent 6 months on the edit, and even on set we would spend a lot of time. We would do 40 takes on an average for a scene. We've gone up to 60-65 takes, and these are privileges that not many first-time directors can afford or are blessed enough to get, which I did. And that happened because the producer completely trusted in my vision and my ability to finish the film and to execute it in a particular way. And and I think it's turned out quite okay. There is no one way of filmmaking in India. There's a lot of independent work happening in India right now, and because we have so many states and so many languages, it's not just that we have Hindi language films being made. There are films being made in every region of India. So we have Bengali films, we have Punjabi films, we have Tamil films, Malayalam films, because India is the world's biggest producer of films. We produce at least, I think, about 1200 films a year, and because of the digital revolution and things becoming more accessible, a lot more independent work is happening now. But on a typical set, there would be a lot of people. There would be at least a crew of 100-150 people. But now the numbers getting smaller because a lot of independent filmmakers are making films with a 5-people crew or 7-people crew. with a DSLR and a sound recordist. Again, in the case of Quad, we had a huge crew because we had a big setup, and generally it's difficult in Mumbai to shoot a film with a small crew. You eventually end up with 80 to 100 people in your crew, which is not always nice because sometimes you want an intimate setting, you want a small crew, but it doesn't work that way. And yeah, Indian films have been appreciated now on an international level. In the last few years, there's been a renewed interest in Indian cinema. A lot of films have made it to Cannes and Berlin and Venice and Toronto, which is really good. And what's really interesting is that because India is so diverse, different filmmakers are telling very local, regional stories set in their immediate reality, and that is painting a very diverse and complex portrait of Indian society as a whole. So I think it's a good time to be a filmmaker in India. So I was actually always interested in theatre, and I grew up wanting to be an actor. But by the time I was 17, 18, I realized that acting is not for me and I'm not really good enough. But I was also interested in writing. I used to write even when I was a child. With films, what happened was, again, around the age of 17, 18, I discovered world cinema. Before that age, I had only seen Indian films and Bollywood films. And I didn't know that films existed outside of Bollywood and maybe Hollywood. And City of God was the first foreign language film that I saw, and it really blew my mind away. I realized for the first time that there are films being made in Brazil, and China and France, and that there are so many different ways of expressing yourself and so many different ways of constructing narratives. And I was really hooked from that point. I just started watching films left, right, and center, and I think that was the pivotal moment when my interest in film became very, very serious, I would say. No, two things happened. One was that I was always busy working on my own projects. I started working on my own projects from a very early age. So by the time I was 18 or 19, I directed my first documentary, then I did my play, then I did a short film. And the other thing was, honestly, I didn't feel like assisting anybody in Mumbai. I didn't see any directors I felt like assisting. And I wanted to go to a film school, but I wanted to go to a film school outside of my country, maybe in America or UK or Europe. But I couldn't afford the fees, I couldn't afford the costs that would be required to be abroad. And also I wanted to be abroad because I wanted to experience a different kind of culture, a different kind of atmosphere for learning. But I didn't have enough money, so which is why film school never really happened for me. My process was more of like self-teaching, which meant reading every possible book on filmmaking, watching as many films as you can, watching making-ofs of films and reading interviews of directors. And apart from that, it was just instinct, which guided me on set. But yeah, I'm not formally trained in filmmaking as such. I don't have any special advice for young filmmakers because I'm a young filmmaker myself. I'm still learning. I've just made my first film. But I can tell you what I have learned from my first film is that it's all contextual. Filmmaking in your context, in your society, in your setting cannot translate to any other filmmaker's story or their way of working. So what's really important is to find your method, find your voice, find your own way of working, finding a crew that you are comfortable with, finding a style which you are comfortable with. And so it's in a way all about finding your own answers and being aware of your context, being aware of your limitations, being aware of what's possible and what's not possible, and then working around that. Because things work differently in Europe, things work differently in Asia, things work differently in Eastern Europe. So understanding where you're coming from and what your world is and what it allows you to do, given the resources that you have, given the budgets that you have to find a path for yourself. So that's what I would suggest.